Ahead on Straight Talk, elected in 2022, Tina Kotek made history as one of the first openly lesbian governors in United States history.
I'm excited to stand before you today as the governor-elect of the great state of Oregon.
Now, more than halfway through her first term, we check in on how she's working to tackle Oregon's biggest challenges.
We can't let up on the top three priorities that I started with: housing, mental health, and education. And we have to muster the stamina to find success on other issues as well.
We talked to her about where her office stands on addressing those key issues and how much progress is left to be made.
We have a lot of work ahead of us in the 2025 session.
Plus, how the state is impacted to cuts to the federal workforce and programs. Right now on Straight Talk. Hello, and thanks for joining us here on Straight Talk. I'm Stephanie Domerat. As state leaders plan their priorities this session, there is a lot of uncertainty. Questions surrounding federal funding remain unanswered. Now, last Monday, I sat down with the state's top leader, Oregon Governor Tina Kotek. We talk about the potential impacts of federal workforce layoffs and funding cuts, plus her priorities as she enters now the second half of her term. Governor Kotek, thanks so much for being here today. It's great to have you.
It's nice to meet you, Stephanie. Thank you for the invite.
Yes. Okay, there's a lot to get to today, so we're going to dive right in. But first, I do want to ask you, of course, you're entering now your third year as governor. What have you learned? And if you go back and do some things differently, is there anything you would?
I need to sleep more.
Okay.
I think one thing I've learned is you have to continue to communicate with folks, right? There's so much going on. There's a lot going on in people's lives. Making sure people understand where your priorities are and that you keep moving forward. And for me, I've been very clear on my top priorities: housing, mental health and addiction, our schools. But even with that, you have to keep talking to people. And I love talking to people, whether it's in the grocery store or on the road, but continue to communicate, because I think right now people need to hear from their governor telling them like what's going on and what's working.
If you could go back, is there anything you would tell yourself as you entered office 3 years ago?
That some of the things that even I knew were going to be complex. Change takes time. So you know, knowing that we can make change on a regular daily basis and show that is important. We all want things to work, and sometimes it takes longer than we think.
Well, let's talk about national news and really the White House. Of course, President Trump now in his second term.
Yeah.
What's it been like being Oregon's top official during this time, and have things been different than you expected with him coming into office again?
Well, it's definitely changed the dynamic. I'm focused on what's going on in Oregon and how to solve problems for Oregonians and here in the state. And the federal dynamic has definitely created a lot of uncertainty. I was in Washington, D.C. back in February, where all the governors from across the country were there. And governors have day-to-day duties. They need a federal government that's clear, consistent in working with our states. And what I'm finding as a governor is that that's very difficult with this administration, because they're taking on a lot of things and doing it in a very erratic fashion, which is very hard for us.
It's happening quickly. A lot of his things, it feels like, he campaigned on a lot of these things and he's following through with them. Has it been as you expected as he stepped into office, though?
I think we knew he was going to have priorities. People do follow through with their campaign priorities. I was hoping that we'd see some thoughtfulness, some clarity on how things were going to change. Because you see a new administration, elections have consequences. Even I have been surprised by the kind of haphazard way he's gone about things and how it's really caused a lot of uncertainty here in Oregon. And so I'm trying to keep a handle on that while also solving problems here.
And we'll talk more about some of the executive orders and different things that have had an impact here in Oregon a little bit later in the show. But let's first talk about the Portland metro area. The economic report that we saw a few weeks ago showed the area is headed for an urban doom loop. Now, for those who aren't familiar with what that is, essentially it means we're stuck in a downward cycle where a loss of revenue perpetuates cuts, which then leads to more cuts and more economic decline. When you heard that, what was your thought?
Well, my first thought was those projections, that future-looking projection, is not destiny. I'm very focused on making sure Portland continues to make the progress they're making. And I will say we have made progress in the last 2 years of addressing livability, community safety, helping get folks who are on the streets into shelter. We're not totally there yet. And I think the story that the nation should know is Portland is improving. Now, this year is critical. We need to continue to let people know that we're open for business. We want employers downtown. We want people coming into downtown, that it is safe, there are things to do, but it's going to take all of us to do that. I still have my regular meetings now with Mayor Wilson, previously Mayor Wheeler, and with Chair Vega Peterson. We meet every other week and talk about these things. As governor, Portland has to be successful for Oregon to be successful.
Are there things you're doing when you have those meetings specifically? Is it talking about tourism? Is it talking about reputation? Like, what are those meetings for exactly?
Well, we just started a new group, the mayor and I, a couple weeks ago, talking about multifamily housing development, large apartment complexes that we need to have here in Portland to meet our housing goals for everyone, so it can be an affordable, livable city for more folks. We sat with investors. We heard point blank, we need to get some big projects started. We need to encourage investors to come into Portland, so we're very much focused on that. I've been working with Mayor Wilson on his plans to get more folks living outside into shelters at night and during the day centers. So we are all working very well, and I think if there's one message I would say to Portlanders, I know things aren't totally fixed yet, but there is progress, and we're figuring this out. All levels of government are working together to figure it out.
So you spoke about that middle housing, the urban, kind of dense housing that's needed for people to have more affordable housing. But that report also did show that higher income earners, actually, even for people who are making up to $160,000 as a household, are struggling to find homes in the metro area. So I know your focus has been about affordable housing, dense housing, that middle housing, but why not do as much focus on the single family housing as well for those people who may be looking for that?
Well, frankly, we need all of it. And the way we improve the affordability of the homes for people who live here now and want to live here, and we will continue to see in-migration. Oregon is a very popular place to move, even if it has slowed down over the years. People are going to still come here. We need all types of housing. More housing lowers the price. It's a supply and demand issue. So we're going to continue to see single family homes in communities in the metro area. We're going to see the type of middle housing, the duplexes, the townhomes, the things that can fill in existing neighborhoods where it's less expensive to build. And that type of housing is cheaper because it takes less to build it. And then we continue to need more apartments as well. There are specific goals for the city of Portland to meet and the metro area. And we have to hit all those goals. If we got to get there's a gap, and we have to get ahead of that gap by more construction.
Let's talk about the unhoused now. A really, really big priority of your office as well. You've talked about that. You recently extended the homeless state of emergency, which you put in order, I think, your first week or month on the job when you came into office. Now, last year, a single point in time count found that the homeless population increased 13% from the year before. That means that 2,700 more people were sleeping on the streets that night, that January, than were prior. Now, the state has spent billions on housing and homelessness, and your proposed budget this year sets aside $2 billion for the next 2 years. What do you say to those who are frustrated about all of this spending without not much improvement and, in fact, in some ways, worsening numbers?
Well, I do think we have stemmed the humanitarian crisis in the last 2 years. We now have a statewide shelter program. We've helped build 4,800 new shelter beds across the state. We've rehoused thousands of folks from those shelters. We've also helped people not become homeless in the first place by getting more rent assistance out the door. So we have new numbers coming this year. I'm hoping that we will show that we are making progress there. And it has been years in the making. We're not going to solve this overnight, but it was so bad that having an emergency was essential to have flexibility. And so by having an emergency crisis, the way I've been able to declare, I can move money around, I can make sure we are flexible in what we do. But I also want to thank everybody at the community level. There are people, churches, nonprofits, volunteers, paid staff, people working across the state, making sure their neighbors can get into shelter and into stability. And we are more organized than we have ever been. And we're going to keep pushing forward. I'm going to keep pushing for those numbers and showing when we have success. We just know that in our rural communities, we've hit all of our goals for the first part of the first 2 years. And now we have to keep going forward. The job's not done after 2 years. You got to keep going.
And speaking of, if there is progress in the rural communities, but if we're speaking about more of our urban communities, Multnomah County, for example, recently, the Homeless Services Department announced a deficit of more than $100 million. This was over just the last couple of weeks. They're now asking for the state to help fill some of that gap. Your response originally, when you heard this, seemed frustrated. You were a bit surprised by that. Why was that?
Well, All local governments are having some budgetary crises. Portland has, as Multnomah County has. I was frustrated. It was a premature ask. So what I have done since then is staff from the county, the city, and the state have sat down, and we're looking at everybody's numbers and say, what do you have? What are we funding now? Who can contribute what? I don't think that's the actual right number, but we're going to have a better number. And then we're going to say, what can everybody do to make sure we can maintain what we've built and help people right now, regardless of what our budgetary challenges are. We're not always going to have all the money we need, but for the dollars we have, we need to know what we have. We have to use them right. And I've been really clear with the city and county. We're not going backwards, but we all have to work together better.
Multnomah County has said that they have more than 40% of the state's homeless population, and so they should get more support from the state to kind of make up for that, especially now as homelessness is such a critical thing. You know, what do you think about that?
Well, I know the argument they're making, and it is true that prior to the pandemic, the city of Portland and Multnomah County became a hub of services, and so a lot of folks who were experiencing homelessness did come into the city, and then the pandemic hit, and people kind of stayed. We are now seeing better work in Clackamas County and Washington County and the entire metro area to everybody do their part. What I will say about more money from the state, the city and county have more money than other communities do. So let's look at our local money first before they come to the state asking for more money. I have to help the entire state. I'm not going to leave Portland behind, but they need to be honest about what they have and frankly prioritize the dollars they do have.
Where does that stand now? Are you planning to meet with them soon?
Well, we had a meeting last week, and I got some initial budgetary numbers. My team sent me some information. There are going to be follow-up meetings. I am not committing to any dollar until I know exactly what it's going to go for and what the county's real budgetary situation is.
Let's move on to healthcare, which is another priority of your office. So Oregon is heavily reliant on Medicaid, which covers 1/3 of the population, half of the state's children. Now, with a goal to reduce federal spending that we're seeing right now, there are concerns that this could mean cuts to Medicaid, and this could put a bigger burden right on the state to basically cover that gap. Is this something that you and your office are looking into right now?
Well, I've been very vocal about what we're hearing out of DC to cut Medicaid. I'm not hearing good proposals. I'm just hearing that they want to take money from Medicaid, which in Oregon is the Oregon Health Plan, to fund tax breaks for billionaires. That is literally what they're doing. We want tax breaks. We have to come from somewhere. They want to take it from Medicaid. I say no to that. That's not going to keep communities safe, and it's certainly not going to help any state in the union meet their health care needs. Because we have expanded health insurance in our state, and we cover a lot of people, a lot through the Oregon Health Plan, we have viable hospital systems throughout our state. We are keeping health care available for people because they have insurance. And I think Washington, D.C. should keep their hands away from Medicaid. It's working, and they should look for other ways to pay for their tax cuts.
What would it mean if they did make cuts to Medicaid, though, for the state?
I think it'd be devastating if some of the things that I'm hearing, from Washington, D.C., it will have real impact on people's lives. It's folks who are already working, who don't get health coverage in their employer that are covered. People with disabilities, folks who aren't going to be able to work, need this care. And then let's not forget about our seniors. A lot of folks who are in long-term care, in nursing homes and other facilities, it's because they get help from Medicaid. So this would be devastating. And my message is, I'm not going to anticipate it. I just don't want them to touch it because it is not the right thing to do.
Would the state be able to step in and make up for that lack of funding?
To be honest, if we don't have a strong federal partnership with Medicaid and to help us fund the Oregon Health Plan, we would have to make cuts.
Yeah.
There's just no way around it. This is a partnership with the federal government that we are able to perform because they are doing their part with taxpayer dollars from Oregonians.
Let's talk more about healthcare, the proposed merger between OHSU and Legacy Health. So it's currently under review by regulators with the Oregon Health Authority. Yes. Now, this merger would mean OHSU would have an even larger part of the healthcare community here in Multnomah County, the metro area. Are you in support of this merger, and why or why not?
I do not have a position on the merger because I want the Oregon Health Authority to do their job based on the law that says they have to review a certain set of criteria to whether to approve a merger like that. What I will say is, whatever happens, we have to make sure we have affordable health care in the metro area. And that is something they are looking at in that process.
So because there is research that shows that consolidation can sometimes mean higher prices for consumers. If it does go through, if the merger does happen, would you try to hold the board accountable to avoiding those higher prices falling on patients?
Well, that is something that the state has to look at under the law to make sure there aren't unintended consequences of increased costs when you see that kind of consolidation, into a hospital monopoly. So it is going to be important that they look at that. If the merger does go through, things that I will be looking at: are we seeing increased access to care? Are the prices staying at a reasonable price? What does it do for research in the state? Because OHSU is a research institution. Is it a good thing? If there's foundation money that has been put together in this deal, is it serving the community? So lots of hard questions. They're still in the process on that.
Okay, thank you so much, Governor Kotek. We are going to take a quick break. We will be right back with more from Governor Kotek after this. And welcome back to Straight Talk. Thanks for joining us. We are continuing our conversation with Governor Tina Kotek. Thanks for being here.
Welcome.
Let's get right back into it. Okay, let's talk about education, another priority for you. As we've mentioned, we are seeing federal cuts to the workforce, including recently the U.S. Department of Education. It lost about half of its workforce. How will this impact Oregon students?
What's definitely going to have impact to the Department of Education at the federal level is a prime funder of some very important programs to help lower income students, students with disabilities, civil rights when it comes to students with disabilities getting what they need. We have, a lot of students who need that kind of support from the federal government. Again, right-sizing the federal government might be the right thing to do, but what you don't want to do is cut services to students. And so it's really going to be up to the Trump administration to say, we're going to hold students harmless while we might do some things that we believe are necessary from an administrative standpoint. I'm not sure that's going to happen. It's been very blunt. Losing half your workforce will have impact in a place like Oregon.
Do you, as you mentioned, this might be the right thing to make some cuts in some ways. Are there things that are happening right now that you're seeing federally that are making sense to you?
Frankly, no. I mean, I believe in accountability. I believe in good governance. But I think what we're seeing from the Trump administration is a very scattershot approach, asking people to leave their jobs, cutting jobs, not even understanding who's being cut, people getting added back. I've been communicating directly with secretaries in the Trump administration about, hey, you've cut these jobs that are really important for this thing or that thing, whether it's, fighting fires or maintaining our electrical grid. These are really important things. So if you're going to right-size government, you have to do it thoughtfully.
Is there something you can do with the Department of Education in this case, as you're saying it's impacting some students here, especially those with disabilities?
I'm going to keep monitoring it. And, when there is a specific funding cut that's coming our way, I will tell people and I will push back on that. In the meantime, Oregon has to do what it can to keep doing its job here at home. So that's why education has been important for me. As you remember, when I first came in as governor, I focused on early literacy and summer. I'm continuing to focus on that. Kids need to read by third grade. We need summer programming so kids can make up any kind of learning loss, particularly that they experienced in the pandemic. But it's not just about investing money. I've put the largest state school fund budget in my budget that we've ever had, over $11.3 billion. That's good. But now we have to focus on accountability. We have to make sure that those dollars are going far enough to meet the needs of our students and improving the outcomes along the way.
And speaking of that accountability, those are the two, the House bill and the Senate bill that were recently introduced about that, looking at accountability and that schools are basically meeting those marks.
Yes.
So why did you introduce those, or why were you part of that right now?
Well, I think it's a two-pronged approach. I helped get us the strongest school budget that we could in my budget, but it's not a blank check. So getting as much money as we can into our districts and making sure that they are following the things that we want to measure. We have things like attendance and graduation rates. And are you reading at third grade? Do you have math proficiency by 8th grade? What parents want is they want to know their districts are tracking the things that matter for the future success of their kids. And that my job as a governor with the department, our Department of Education, is making sure we're helping districts get where they need to be. And frankly, if they're not hitting the mark, they need more help, and we're going to make that required help not voluntary anymore.
So in these bills, basically some of these districts could potentially lose funding if they don't meet those markers or those requirements, as you mentioned.
Not lose money. So if on the third or fourth, by the fourth year after help from the state and coaching and technical assistance, if by the fourth year their performance has not improved, we could require a redirection of their current funding to certain things so we can get their performance to be better. We wouldn't take money from the schools. We say, here, you're getting this money. I need up to about a quarter of that to redirect how you're spending it because you're obviously not hitting your goals. The point is never to get to that point. I want our districts to know what the expectations are, use their dollars wisely, and get all of their students back to a better performance.
So they would have help essentially to meet these markers. There's money in the budget to help them kind of establish that as well with these two bills.
That's
okay. Have you looked at other states and how, the ones that are ranking high? I think the top one was Massachusetts recently. Do you look at other states and try to look at what they're doing that we could use as an example here in Oregon?
Well, we definitely see that. Other states tie a lot more of their money to performance. We're moving in that direction. We're also focusing on science-based reading. Why I focus on early literacy in my first year and continue to do so is make sure every educator in our state is using science-based approaches to teaching reading, and also making sure that every district is using the right materials. We have some districts who do not use curriculum that is based in science. That has to stop. So all of these things working together, I think, will show improvement for our kids.
Okay, let's talk about more of the federal government impacts that we're seeing right now. So this last week, the EPA pulled back dozens of regulations that aim to protect clean water, clean air. We've also seen climate-related grants being frozen. Specifically, the near $200 million grant that was climate-related for pollution. How will the state fill the gap on those, and are there programs at risk of being cut?
So a couple things. We're going to fight for every dollar that was promised by the federal government. Again, Oregon taxpayer dollars going to the federal government, coming back to us in the pollution protection grants. It is having an impact, but that freeze, we know of a housing complex that is getting built in Tillamook County who was expecting those dollars to help them put energy efficient appliances into the housing that they're building, and now they're on hold. It has direct impact when the federal government keeps the money flowing to the states. On the other issue of the EPA, I just want to remind people back in the first Trump administration, we were concerned about EPA regulation. So we passed, when I was Speaker of the House, the Oregon Environmental Protection Act in 2019, which says that whatever the protections were in 2017, protections for air and our water, that they will continue to be in place. So regardless of what the EPA does, we will continue to have strong standards in our state to keep our environment that we all love clean and healthy.
So there aren't any programs right now that are potentially on the chopping block because of that $200 million, that it might not be coming?
Well, we're going to fight for every dollar. A lot of that money was going into programs that we had already established and we want to continue to grow, like heat pumps, subsidies for folks to get into zero emission, cars. So we're going to fight to get that money. When the federal government says you've won an award and we have promised you these dollars, they need to come here. And frankly, I believe it's illegal that the Trump administration is holding those things back. Congress approved them, we signed on the dotted line, and we should see those dollars come into Oregon.
We only have a few minutes left here, so I want to ask you, it is Women's History Month, so if you could, as a female leader, I guess, I've asked this question and I've heard from other female leaders about imposter syndrome. Is that something that you've ever dealt with or do still deal with?
I have noticed over the years that sometimes I'm the only woman in the room. And I've hung out with a lot of women governors who, and we're still in the minority among all governors across the country. What I have seen is that when you have diverse perspectives in a room, and that is women and men sitting there and having conversations, you get better policy, you get better choices. Difference in opinions and perspectives is really important. So, I played a lot of sports as a kid, and I played against boys, on the street, like we played pickup basketball. So I can go toe to toe with anyone, so I'm not too worried about that.
Okay, it's not something you've really dealt with before. Interesting. Okay, yeah, thank you. I want to ask one more question. If you could go back in time and talk to your younger self then, what kind of advice would you give her? What would you tell her?
That even though it'll be tough to come out as a lesbian, you're gonna be the governor of the great state of Oregon, and you're gonna show the way for a lot of young people that they can be anything they want to be.
And you're making history today. Governor Kotek, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this week here on Straight Talk. Coming up next week, we sit down for a conversation with Vancouver City Manager to discuss the city's growth over the last few years, plus how they plan to tackle homelessness and boost efforts to build more housing as demand there grows. And a reminder, you can stream Straight Talk on your own schedule anytime. Just download the free KGW Plus TV app, available now on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.